Hello, my name's Emma, and welcome to Read the World, my project where I try to document the unreasonable about books that I read. I'm hoping that this channel will have a bit of a focus on international literature and translation. I just got done with getting a master's degree at Korea University in Seoul, South Korea. So I thought that my first video to kind of introduce sort of things that I've been reading would be talking about all 22 translated Korean novels that I have read. I really wanted to do like 25 because then I was thinking, well, I could do 25 Korean novels that I've read, and then later I can do another 25 novels that I've read once I've read a bunch more, and then that'll have an even 50. But I wanted to just get started on making videos just to, because if I wasn't, I gotta start somewhere. I gotta start. So I gotta just get the ball rolling, gotta get things going. I've already read 22 books. That's a lot. So I thought I'd just talk about those. And it was either be thorough with 25 or just get going with 22. And 22 is still a lot. And so I was thinking a lot about how I want this video to really just be letting you know what these books are like so that you can decide for yourself whether or not you want to read them. I think that all of these books, except one, and I'll get to that one, all of these books except one are worth reading. If it sounds interesting to you, then you should read it. But I will say, controversial take, I didn't love most of them. I didn't hate any of them except one, but a lot of them I was very underwhelmed by. I think that the Korean style of writing, the Korean novel, just isn't quite for me yet. I'm getting there. I'm figuring out what exactly kind of Korean novel I really like. A lot of it is very subtle and slow, not a lot of action, not a lot of even storytelling. There are a lot of big ideas in all of these novels, which I love. But a lot of them are just very in your face, straightforward with just ideas and not a lot of story or character. Like, there are maybe a few things happening, there are characters, but all of that is just putting forward a certain idea. So I really appreciate that I've been able to absorb these ideas, but I really crave a good story and compelling characters and lots of layers and complexity, which is not what I have found so far. I would love to hear any other thoughts on what you think of Korean literature as a whole. If you've read multiple Korean novels, things that you see in common. Overall, that's what I feel like I've seen in a lot of the Korean novels that I've read, and I have read 22 of them. Am I an expert? No. I do speak Korean. I lived in Korea for a total of almost 5 years. I still would absolutely not claim to be an expert on Korean culture, history, definitely not Korean literature. However, I am very interested in all those things. I'm very interested in history, culture, and literature. I kept meaning to read academic articles or something about Korean literature to see what scholars have said about that topic, and then I didn't. So you're just gonna have my raw thoughts about all 22 of these novels that I've written in my handy dandy notebook for you right here. So let's see. First up, we have Kim Ji-young, born 1982, by Nam-Joo. This is a very famous Korean novel. This is one of the ones that people who have heard about Korean literature have heard about. This one definitely summarizes what women experience in their day-to-day lives. So the average Korean woman experiences is including microaggressions, prejudice. None of it is extreme. It's not about severe abuse or egregious injustice or anything like that. It's just an average Korean woman and all of the little things slowly driving her insane as she is just crushed and oppressed by this overall system, and all the things that she has to sacrifice and give up solely because she is a woman. And so this is a very key novel when it comes to Korean feminism. So if you're interested in that topic, this is definitely for you. I thought it was very slow and I wish it had said more. But I still think that if you're interested in that topic, you should pick it up. Next, we have The Vegetarian by Han Kang. This is Han Kang's most famous novel, and this one also touches on women's issues. It's about a woman who decides to become vegetarian and how everyone around her in her life is acting like that is the craziest thing to do and trying to prevent her from doing it and reacting in a really extreme way. I really interpret it as how a very conformist collective society reacts to people trying to go against the grain and trying to force that person back into a conformist box. And I think that Han Kang's writing is gorgeous and incredible. But the vegetarian, I want to more focus on the woman, the vegetarian herself, but I thought that a lot of the focus of the book was on the gross men in her life and the ways that they objectify and sexualize her. And I didn't love that. Like, obviously, Han Kang was trying to do something with that. I just didn't love it. It was my favorite. But it is, again, one of the most well-known Korean novels out there that people know about. So if you're interested in foundational Korean literature, women's issues, this one's for you. Next, we have Almond by Sohn Won-pyung. This one I think got famous because someone from BTS recommended it. So now everybody thinks it's the bee's knees. I had a good time reading this book. Things actually happen, and that is a little rare when it comes to a Korean novel. It actually has lots of action. It has a big hook at the beginning. I think like the very beginning is my favorite part. Really pulls you in, really interesting. It's about a boy who does not feel emotions. He has like a medical diagnosis for not being able to feel emotions, but that doesn't mean that he's a cruel or evil person. Like, I guess theoretically he might be a sociopath, but he's like a really good kid. And so it's about like his relationships and the choices that he makes. And there are a lot of parts of it that I found really touching. There were also a lot of parts of it that I found very cheesy and over the top and goofy, but it's very short. And so if you're interested in just like an action-packed book that really hits you, that really like hooks you, and has definitely made some waves in attracting attention to Korean literature, then I picked this one up. Next we have Violets by Shin Kyung-Sook. This one is very typical sad woman being sad. That's very much an archetype in Korean literature. The very beginning has this excellent chapter on the main character's childhood and like this very intimate relationship she has with a childhood friend that I really loved and thought was beautiful. And then the rest of it is just the rest of her life being a sad woman. And it wasn't bad. It was just sad woman being sad. So I'm not going to dissuade you. Again, I'm not trying to throw people off of these books. Next, we have Please Look After Mom by Shin Kyung-sook. She's a very prolific writer. Multiple books by her have been translated into English. And I thought this one was very compelling. Again, talks about the role of women in Korean society. It's a picture of this Korean family and what happens after their elderly mother goes missing. And there were parts of this novel that I got really emotional about. I thought it was very impactful. And then next up, we have The Plotters by Kim Eun-soo. This one, again, there is action. Things happen. It is about an assassin who is employed by kind of this underground secret assassins guild that old Korean politicians employ in order to get rid of their enemies and the problems they have in their lives. I really loved this one. I thought it was a lot of fun. It does have a kind of open-ended conclusion. Like, it ends and you don't really know what happened or what's going to happen. So very ambiguous. Just be prepared for that. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was really interesting commentary on Korean politics and like current society. It's both interesting, intriguing, has some action, has plot going on. The Plotters has lots of plot going on, while also having a lot of things to say about corruption and power and things like that. I thought it was a good time. Next, we have Concerning My Daughter by Hye-jin Kim. Read this one very recently, like within the past month, I think. This one is about generational differences and how homosexuality is regarded in Korean society. This one is interesting because it's in the perspective of a very difficult, unhappy, prejudiced, homophobic, bitter woman, and how her daughter and her daughter's girlfriend move back home into her house. Not a lot of plot, not a lot of things happen, but there are a lot of ideas. So if you're interested in those topics, then pick this one up. Next, we have Cursed Bunny by Bora Chung. This one is a short story collection. It is very supernatural, strange, speculative short stories. And so if that sort of thing appeals to you, then definitely pick this one up. I will say, it didn't blow me away. I thought that a lot of the messages, a lot of the things that the stories were saying seemed quite obvious to me, quite straightforward. It seemed to say much that was very new. I will say a lot of the imagery and strange things happening were very original and surprising and fun. So those speculative elements, good. The actual messaging, I was unimpressed. But this one is also very popular. Next, we have I Want to Die, But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki by Baek Se-hee. This one, on the cover, I remember, it says the runaway bestseller. I saw this all over the place in bookstores in Korea and have heard a lot about it. It is, okay, this is supposed to be novels. This isn't really a novel, but it's always in the fiction section whenever I saw it in the bookstore in Korea. I wonder what section it's in if I went to like Barnes and Noble or something. It'd probably just be in, I don't know. It would just be in translated fiction. I don't know. I feel like it's put in with fiction, but I don't think it is it? Because it's set up as transcripts of Baek Se-hee's therapy sessions with her therapist. And that's what it is. It's just transcripts of therapy sessions. I think this will be amazing for you if you have never been to therapy and you know nothing about therapy. Then you might read this and be like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe she's able to talk about these things so openly. If you have ever even really thought about therapy for a little bit, I don't think this book will really blow your mind, because all of the things that it discusses are very basic. The author in these therapy sessions isn't going through anything extraordinary. It's sad woman being sad, which to some people could be really relatable and helpful, because we all have those times in our lives when we are sad woman being sad, regardless of like gender or creed. We all have those sad woman times. And it definitely reflects where South Korea is with mental health services, where their mental health system is still very much developing. Talking about mental health issues and therapy is still very stigmatized. And so because of that, I think that this is very much on the level of Korean society. It's really helpful to the average person living in Korea, like the average Korean person living in Korea, to learn about, but especially to a Western audience. Like, I have been to multiple therapists and have read multiple books about therapists and therapy. And so this book just didn't add much to my understanding or knowledge, you know? But if you're interested in just seeing where's the average South Korean person at with mental health, this really paints a picture of like, this was revolutionary. This was a big hit. So that's an interesting kind of peek. Next book is Tower by Bae Myung-hoon. This book, it's about a country that is entirely contained within an enormous, like, I can't remember, like 200-story width of a city block skyscraper. And all of the political intrigue and drama that comes with living in such a country. And it's very much a satire and commentary on Korean politics. And so because of that, I loved it and thought it was hilarious and brilliant. But if you don't know anything about Korean bureaucracy, infrastructure, and that sort of thing, you'll probably be pretty lost most of the time. I thought it was so funny and so fun. So that's interesting to you, go for it, but I wouldn't recommend it as someone's first book in Korean literature by any means. I had a great time. And then we have I Went to See My Father by Shin Kyung-Sook, second Shin Kyung-Sook book on the list. First one, Please Look After Mom. Second one, I Went to See My Father. Shin Kyung-Sook has a lot to say about the family. This one, I would say very typical, really seems to bring together a lot of the elements of Korean literature that I see throughout books that I've read, where it's very quiet, very soft, not a strong plot, a lot of a woman thinking about her relationship with her father and her family and thinking about her childhood and her past. I liked it. I thought it was nice. It didn't change my life, but I thought it was an interesting reflection. And then we have Lemon by Kwon Yeo-sun. This one is like a crime novel, not quite. There's a murder, and then it's like the people around the murder. I read this one like a year or two ago, and I just remember being incredibly bored, and like, it's very short and doesn't really say much, kind of dull. I'm sorry, that's mean. That's mean. I'm trying to encourage people to read whatever sounds intriguing to them. I'm doing a bad job with this one. Very short novel reflecting on a murder and people connected to that murder. So I just didn't like it. I thought it was boring and didn't have a lot to say. Oops. The Old Woman with the Knife by Gu Byeong-mo is another book about someone belonging to a secret assassins guild in Seoul. But this one is an old woman. So a lot more commentary on like aging in Korean society and loneliness, political intrigue. I thought that the plot was less strong with this one, especially when you compare it to The Plotters, the other secret assassin book. But if you want that kind of female perspective, that older woman perspective, then this could be interesting for you. Then To the Warm Horizon by Jin-young. I own this one. I bought it because I thought that the cover was gorgeous. And it's an apocalypse novel. And I was really intrigued by the prospect of a translated Korean apocalypse novel. And whenever there's a genre that I haven't read translated from Korean, I like have to snatch it up. So I was really intrigued by how it was going to do the apocalypse. And what is so hard for me about this one is that I didn't like it. I thought that the premise didn't make a lot of sense. The way that the apocalypse was set up, I didn't think it made a lot of sense. The way they respond, I just didn't feel like anyone in this book acted like a rational, normal human being that made sense. There is a sapphic romance in it that I thought was very cute and sweet, very straightforward, very nice. But then just like a lot of the people around these two girls in love just seemed to react to things in a way that I found very bizarre and inconsistent, and I didn't love it. But then I was talking to a Korean friend of mine when I was in Korea, and how she talked about how she loved this book and she thought it was incredible and like one of her favorites. And I was like, oh no, isn't that so awkward when you are talking to a friend and they loved the book and you hated the book? Which is worse? Which is worse? When you love the book and they hate the book, or when they love the book and you hate the book? Which scenario is more awkward? I don't know. I feel like both. I can handle it when I loved it and they hated it. But when they loved it and I hated it, I find that uncomfortable. And that was a scenario that I was in. So she read it in Korean and I read it in English. She said that she just found the prose to be really beautiful and absorbing. And so I wonder if something was lost in translation. I could read it in Korean. I own like 3 or 4 novels in Korean that I have yet to actually read because I am a chicken. Anyway, To the Warm Horizon. It's short. That's the thing. That's the other thing about Korean literature. Most of it is very short, like novella length, which I think is really interesting because China and India and Japan, because the Tale of Genji, like there are lots of other East Asian, South Asian literary / storytelling traditions of tales that are very long. Because we've got Tale of Genji from Japan, Journey to the West, and like the other old classics from China, the Ramayana. Korea has a lot of really short ones. Even a lot of the classics that I have been recommended by Korean people, very short. So I think that's really interesting. And I wonder if there's an explanation for that. If I actually did any research about this, maybe I would learn that. Who knows? So that does mean very low risk with any of these. A lot of them, as you can see, I didn't like, but I didn't I didn't lose a lot because it didn't take me that long to read. So perks of Korean literature. Even if it wasn't that good, it didn't take you that long. You didn't waste a lot of your time. Then 7 Years of Darkness by You-Jeong. This is another crime novel, more involved than Lemon. Just looks at a lot more sides of the crime and the incident. When I think about reading this book about a year ago, I read it about a year ago, the images in the novel, like the town where the crimes take place, because I think multiple people die. Like I can really picture that town. There's like a reservoir, there are things underwater. It's all this eerie dark imagery. And I still really remember the characters. And so I remember being kind of unimpressed. I think I already said that word in this video to describe a book. I'm sorry about that. Underwhelmed, shall we say, by it overall, like as a crime story. But when I think about it, I still really remember a lot of the scenes and the characters and the things that happened, which I think counts for a lot. It talks a lot about the way that a community reacts to tragedy. The main character is the son of a man who was convicted of multiple murders in a town. The fact that he's the center of the novel is very impactful because it shows how another person's actions can impact all of the people around them. In this case, for the worst. All of the different ways that things unfold are quite dark and slow and reflective. I feel like I only gave this like 3 stars when I read it, but maybe it deserves more than that, now that I'm thinking about it. Up next, we have I'm Waiting for You by Kim Boyoung. This is some short stories, except that there's, I think, from what I remember, there are 4 short stories. Two of them are connected and the other 2 are also connected. So it's almost more like 2 novellas that are packaged together. I think that if you liked Exhalation by Chung, one of my favorite novels, not novels, that was a short story collection. One of my favorite books of all time, very cerebral, deep thinking, sci-fi short stories, then you would like 2 of these connected novellas in I Am Waiting for You. And then the other 2 is like this sweeping space opera-esque romance. I really liked this one. Like the 2 sets of novellas are very different. They're both like both sets are sci-fi, very different from each other. One is like deeply philosophical, complicated, couldn't always keep track of what was going on. But that's kind of what you want sometimes in sci-fi. Sometimes I really want a sci-fi where I have no clue what's going on. And that's what this one was. And then the other one where it's this romance of these 2 people who have been separated while traveling at the speed of light and like trying to catch up to each other. Really, really fun. So yeah, very different, very fun. I like both of them. And then we have I Have the Right to Destroy Myself by Young-ha Kim. This is the one. This is the one that I did not like. And I don't think you should read. Just so you know, like you might see it around. I always saw it at the bookstore in Korea when I would go to the translated section, and it will be there on the table. So like I'm not going to stop you. I can't stop you from reading it, but I just thought it was gross. It's all about human suffering and misery. That's fine. There are a lot of books about that, but this one just especially seemed to revel in like the suffering and misery of women in particular, because there are men and women that are really like examined in this novella, but it just sort of seemed to really take this particularly disgusting glee in like the torture of women. And I didn't like that. I thought it was gross and misogynistic, because the women were like so much more miserable and tormented than the men were. Like the men were also miserable, but kind of just for emotional reasons, but tons of like horrible things happened to women, or like gross things. I don't know. I didn't like it. I thought it was gross, and that there are way better things you can read about misery and suffering. Just go read something else. But I can't stop you. Go read it if you want to. Next, we have Greek Lessons by Han Kang. I loved this one. I thought it was great. Short, kind of ambiguous reflection on loneliness and language, which is really interesting. But that does make sense because language connects us. And so if there's a lack of human connection, there's like a lack of language. And so it alternates perspectives between a woman who has lost her ability to speak. Like she can understand what's going on around her, she just can't bring herself to speak. And the last time that this happened to her when she was a teenager, she kind of came out of it when she learned, when she started taking French classes. So now she's taking Greek classes in an attempt to come out of this. And so it alternates between her perspective and the perspective of her Greek teacher. Both of these people are lonely and struggling and craving human connection. And I just thought it was so beautifully, beautifully written. There were lines that would just stick with me after I read them. And I think very relevant, especially in these post-COVID times, and very short. I just thought it was really beautiful. I loved it. And then we have The Disaster Twiist by Ko-eun. This one, things are happening. Not sure if those things make any sense. But like that was funny. It was like, it's very absurd, satirical about the tourism industry. It's about a woman who works for a dark tourism company, which is in and of itself is a satire on tourism. And where like they send people on tours of places where horrible things happened, but like not necessarily to do anything constructive, but just kind of like to gawk. Like that's what it's all about, and so you can see some clear commentary there. She's sent to on a tour that they are considering cutting from their company because it's not tragic enough anymore. Things just kind of unravel from there in very bizarre, kind of confusing ways. I think parts of this are super funny and parts are really confusing, but I think that was the goal, and that's great. Love that for them. I do think that the ideas of capitalism, exploitation, tourism could have been pushed even further, but it does bring things up about those topics that I think are really worthwhile. And so finally, we have my top three Korean books, translations. This is in no particular order, but there are definitely Some people who, like, you don't have to read these, especially one of them. It will not be for everyone, but I loved all three of these. I'm just gonna up front right away talk about Walking Practice by Dolki Min. This one is disgusting, horrible. It is about an alien who crash lands on Earth, and the only way to survive is to eat people. And it's very graphic and disgusting, but it's also so profound and beautiful and reflecting on like the meaning of being human and and like craving human connection and wanting to find who you are and other people to understand you. It has very queer interpretations of gender and sexuality that I found so thought provoking. If you don't like being grossed out, then don't read it. Don't. Don't do it. It's not for you. Just trust that there's a really great novel out there that talks all about queer coded perspectives on what it means to be human, told from the perspective of someone who is not human but who pretends to be human, can change their appearance to look human. There's a lot there too. Look, even that is just so metaphorical. So if those ideas intrigue you, you should definitely pick up these books. But if you are in any way, even slightly squeamish, not for you, don't do it. Just trust me on this one. It is so gross. So gross in every possible way. Just nasty. But I love the ideas and the emotion. It is just laden with emotion. It is so good. Love this one. I recommend to certain people. Okay. Next, we have Love in the Big City by Sang-young Park. Sang-young Park? Sang-young Park? Sang-young Park? Is he the only Park on this list? I think so. Yeah, I haven't struggled with that decision and up until now. That pronunciation decision. Love in the Big City. This is, I don't remember how many, but like a few interconnected novellas, short stories about being a gay man in modern day Seoul. It's my understanding that a lot of this is quite autobiographical, that it really draws from the author's life. And I just thought that the way that it portrays friendship and romance and making your way in the world as a young person and the challenges and triumphs there was really beautiful. And I just really enjoyed the observations. It's a very slow, quiet book. This is one of those ones where there isn't like a solid plot storyline, but it's just a lot of thinking and reflecting about those experiences. And I just really liked it. I thought that the writing style was beautiful and that it just had a lot of good things to say. And this is after I've already said that I want a good story and like compelling characters. This doesn't really have like a main story, a strong plot, but I still liked it a lot, and I think that's really saying something. And then we have finally Shoko Smile by Eunyoung. This is a collection of short stories that are a lot about female friendships and globalization, like a lot of international friendships, cultural differences, the tragedy and pain of history. What really struck me is that I feel like in these 22 books, they touch a lot on family dynamics, generational trauma, political commentary, and feminism. I feel like those are big themes across many of these 22 books that I have read. And Shoko Smile touches on topics that I hadn't seen before. I hadn't seen a lot of reflection on international friendships and interactions and how complicated those can be, especially if your country and someone else's country have painful history together. I thought that even though other books that I've read translated from Korean do talk about female friendships, Shoko Smile touched on that topic in a different way. I don't know. I'm not articulating this well. In a way that I really connected with. Oh, and it talks a lot about like mother-daughter relationships, and that was really interesting. Yeah, I just thought there were a lot of ideas that I hadn't seen written about in quite the same way before. I think that one is very worth it. I think that Anton Her is a very well-known, prolific translator of Korean work. And I think in an interview about his translation of Love in the Big City, he talked about how even though it is short stories, I think they market it either as a novel or as a collection of novellas because Western audiences, or just audiences in general, audiences don't want short stories and that it's not very marketable, which I really wonder if that's true, if there's data to back that up. I mean, I'm sure there is. He's in the industry. He's a giant in that sector of the industry. He would know. So if that's true, I wonder why. Because in this stage, we love short form content. It's very satisfying to get through something in one sitting, but maybe it's just because people want to be able to say they read a whole book. But I think that short stories deserve a lot more credit. Shoko Smile, excellent short stories. And then I'm Waiting for You, which I mentioned earlier, also excellent short stories. So those definitely deserve more consideration. I hope you enjoyed all of my rambling today. As I mentioned, I do plan on continuing to read lots of Korean translations and hopefully books actually in the original Korean if I can get my act together. And so stay tuned in a year or two for another video called I Read 22 Korean Books. I'm also thinking about doing a video about North Korean books and books from the Korean diaspora, just because when I get on a certain topic, I just can't be stopped. Also, I plan on reading books from other countries as well. I read whatever I want, but just to have a certain direction for this channel, I want to read international literature. So this is just a starting point since they're things that I've already read within the past few years. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.